What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, October is here, and it appears that Microsoft is setting up to actually make some announcements for what was once their flagship franchise, and seems like we could be getting some pretty big news then heading into next year for the 25th anniversary of the Xbox brand. But we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we're going to be talking about Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 as that's out this week. Reviews went live yesterday. We'll go over those, and we even got some footage that got out online of the Switch 2 running it. So quite a bit to look at there. And Sony seems to have some interesting strategies here setting up that have to do with acquisitions, go figure, but not necessarily ones you might be thinking of. All that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps it a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're here every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, keeping you up to date on the world of gaming. So check back every weekday morning to see what we have for you. And we're gonna start today with Prototype, which is a game that, I saw this pop up and I said, it's been a while since I played that. This was back on the Xbox 360, and it was a really, really cool release, but it's sort of been kind of left behind, all right? And what I mean by that is if you play it, say, on PC, it's not the most compatible game out there on Steam, and in fact, there are a lot of mods that try to fix the game up, but there was a recent update for Prototype 1 and 2 that appears to have broken some of those mods that's then led to people data mining them, and they found some very interesting things that could actually be pointing to remasters for these games. We can see this posted. This is over on Reddit, where they point out a few credits that were apparently added to the games in the back end after being found with data mining that shows Iron Galaxy Studios being the big one here. There's also some test levels and things that were spotted, but really just random updates that went through for these games already raised eyebrows. Iron Galaxy Studios, we know them for many different remasters and working collaboration with Microsoft and Activision here. So it does kind of line up as to, Prototype remasters. Now, the game isn't available as an Xbox Play Anywhere title because Microsoft doesn't have it lined up on the PC side for their Xbox application. Again, seems like it would make a lot of sense for that remaster, and then also release it into Game Pass as maybe something they have as a big monthly drop there for people. So really cool. Gonna keep an eye on this one. Seems like something that would make for a good Twitter drop, just randomly. Also, it looks like Silent Hill Remake is now in full swing over at Bloober Team. This was part of an investors discussion with Bloober Team. We can see this posted, and this was a question: can we learn more about the current roadmap? Is this about ongoing work on future projects? What does that look like? They responded, we have two first-party production teams, one of which is working on Silent Hill 1, and the other has begun working on a second project. The second-party team is currently working on 5 projects. Wow, okay. Well, we already heard about Silent Hill 1 going into development, being greenlit and ready to go. So this just really tells us, yes, they are full speed ahead on that right now. And Silent Hill 1 is interesting because there's a lot of imagination for that game on the PS1, so much so there's going to be some creative liberties that I'm sure that are taken with it, and that is that's quite the challenge for Bloober Team to figure out how to then translate that over to the kind of visuals we have now in the presentation. But it could also be really, really cool since there are a lot of people I'm sure who have never experienced that game, and to be frank, kind of hard for the newer generation to go back to some of those early PS1 3D era games. So this could be a really cool remake. I'm sure we're still years off from it, but good to hear they are full speed ahead on this thing. Oh, and we did have a new firmware release for the Switch and Switch 2. We can see this over on Nintendo support page. This is for firmware release 20.5.0, and go figure, general system stability improvements to enhance the user's experience. Now, typically Nintendo is this vague about their firmware releases. There could still be some stuff that's been changed in the back end, and many are wondering if this had to do with any of the backwards compatibility issues that have popped up, as Nintendo has worked to fix those, even with ones that just say general stability fixes. So seems like something people will be testing, any of the backwards compatible games that have issues. And if you are just thinking of any off the top of your head, go ahead and try it out after updating your Switch 2 with the newest firmware and see if it works. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. Reviews did drop yesterday, and while we have the Metacritic score, some of the reviews themselves and how they were sort of going back and forth on if this is something to recommend were kind of interesting. But we do finally have footage of it running on the Switch 2, and even kind of how Nintendo is achieving all of this, or how much is emulated and how much isn't. So let's start though with the reviews. We can see this over on Metacritic, currently coming in at an 88. Now, this is on 43 reviews. Of course, this is categorized under just Switch 1 because that's what the game's released for. We do have an update for the Switch 2 that when you pop in the Switch 1 cartridge will then go ahead and pop up and you'll just have to download it. But we can see on 43 positive reviews, 0 mixed, 0 negative, and there are actually several perfect scores here. Shack News, for example, says whether you mastered Gravity years ago or are venturing to Mario's outer space for the first time, you're in for a treat. Eurogamer Germany says, what else can you say about these two games? For me, they were and remain the crowning glory of Mario creation, masterpieces of level design, and a bottomless treasure trove of interesting ideas to toy and tinker with. VGC also gave it a perfect score, saying Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 were considered among the best games ever made when they were released, and a decade and a half later, that still hasn't changed. The attempt to replace the Wii Remote's pointer controls with Joy-Con gyro movement never feels quite as intuitive as the original experience, but this concession won't dampen the spirits of anyone lucky enough to play these games for the first time. Look, if you've never played Mario Galaxy 1 or 2, maybe you just didn't, when the 3D All-Stars Collection came out, maybe you didn't have a Switch then, and we know they discontinued it, and while there's physical versions floating around, they've only gotten more expensive, so maybe you missed out on Galaxy 1 and Galaxy 2. If that's the case, I mean, these are really, really good 3D platformers, so I get why someone could go, you know what, even at 70, it's worth it. There's a lot of fun to have here. And if I go and look on the opposite end of the spectrum here, I see Well Played with a 75. They start out saying, I miss the virtual console days, when your new Nintendo console came with a potentially vast library of classic games at very approachable prices. Now we're caught between paying a subscription fee for drip-fed retro catalogs and paying top dollar at retail for games considered too new for a Nintendo Switch Online, but old enough that they need retouching. That's the thing. I look at some of these reviews and they just sort of go over the back and forth nature of these games are really expensive, but they're also really good. But they're also really expensive. So it's like back and forth there. And we can see this with Oatmeal Dome, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, saying both games are emulation plus native port hybrids, very similar to Galaxy 1 and Super Mario 3D All-Stars. The game code was rebuilt to run natively on Switch's CPU, while graphics, audio, etc. run under Nintendo's Wii emulator. So again, kind of that hybrid emulation that we've seen before that had pretty good results, I'd say, with 3D All-Stars. And when you take a look at some of the footage that was uploaded here to YouTube, this is from Gamerside Official. It is in 4K for the Switch 2 with Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. And I would say Mario Galaxy 2 looks more impressive than 1. I think it's just the color palette. It's much brighter looking. And I mean, yeah, it looks like an upscaled, smoothed out, HDR-enabled Wii game that you may have already seen, say, in an emulator with a pretty decent system. But if you haven't, I mean, it looks good still. The art style still holds up, I think, anyway, and the game is awesome. So, yeah, for me, I'm picking it up just digitally, Mario Galaxy 2. I already have Mario Galaxy 1 on the 3D All-Stars collection, so I'm good there. And maybe down the road, unless Nintendo discontinue, with my luck, they'll discontinue the physical version, just to spite me. Maybe I'll hold out and see if I find it on sale or used down the road, and it's like $40 or something for the physical copy with like a GameStop discount and all the other stuff on top of it. But at least for me, Mario Galaxy 2 is what I was looking for the most part. I almost thought that's what they would have done just outright, not even done Galaxy 1 again. But I guess in their mind, they discontinued it so they could then resell it packaged in with Galaxy 2. But Galaxy 2 is awesome. So is Galaxy 1 if you haven't played that yet. And that's going to be the big thing people have to figure out for themselves. Is it worth buying in for $70 if you haven't played them? Or if you have, do you dig out your Wii or Wii U again and fire it up there and play through it there on lower resolution and not looking necessarily as good, or in handheld mode? Again, there's a lot of things you have to contend with for this one, but for me, Mario Galaxy 2 is enough for now, and I'll check it out on the Switch 2 when it comes out, actually tomorrow, so exciting stuff. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft and something happening later on this month that I am very much looking forward to, because it seems like we're going to have something new Halo related. Well, for games anyway. You can have all kind like a cookbook or kinds of merchandise and stuff announced. No, this seems to be a new or maybe a familiar Halo game being remade. All right, so we can see this is posted. This is over on Halo Waypoint. This was dropped earlier this week, saying, but back in June, we let the community know that we'd be continuing the conversation from last year's Halo World Championships and the A New Dawn video, sharing more about what we've been working on. Like last year, we'll be on the main stage talk about it, but this year, we've also got a deep dive panel plan for the community stage that you won't want to miss. Both the segment on the main stage and the panel on the community stage will be going down early Friday afternoon on October 24th at the Halo World Championships. Make sure you're there early so you don't miss a second. We're going to be waiting for the schedule. They're going to post an official schedule that has times and everything set up. But what I assume this is, one, the remake for Halo Combat Evolved that we have heard about multiple times now, seems like that's getting lined up for the 25th anniversary for the Xbox brand. That'll be happening November 2026 then, so next year. There's also discussion around a multiplayer project of some kind for the Halo universe, like just multiplayer specifically. And it's hard to say with that. I mean, some have wondered, is it like their take on like a battle royale? Is it just a full-on new multiplayer game with a bit of a twist that makes it different enough from the current traditional online Halo matches that you can have in Halo Infinite or Master Chief Collection? Or is this just the next Halo game? And they're ready to start talking about it, or at least showing it off. And when they say deep dive, I do think about them discussing a lot of the development process, like showing people at their desk at Halo Studios working on wireframes and stuff on the computer, and them sort of going over what they've learned in the last couple of years with Unreal Engine and how that's being applied to this Halo Combat Evolved remake. And I know people shudder now when they hear Unreal Engine, but the thing I will give Microsoft credit for is they tend to be pretty good with Unreal Engine, mostly because the Coalition has been using it forever now, and they're very good, and they have their own support team that can help out within Microsoft. So I'm kind of looking at this as, yes, their first real attempt at binding Unreal Engine with some of these main projects in Halo's universe, but it could also, I think, open things up to a more consistent flow of releases for Halo, which should just be a much bigger property than it is now. It's been there since the beginning with Microsoft. It still has that, oh, that's definitely an Xbox thing when you see Master Chief. So here's hoping they can get this all worked out and push towards a big release next year for the Xbox 25th anniversary. But we got to see it at the Halo World Championships later on this month. Again, they mentioned October 24th. I'll keep you guys up to date when it comes to the time, and we'll see what they have. Next up, let's talk about Sony and their strategy going forward when it comes to entertainment and acquisitions. And Sony's had a rough go of it recently when it comes to acquisitions. It's not everyone. Insomniac's worked out great for them. Haven doesn't seem to be. Bungie definitely didn't. We saw what happened with Firewalk and Concord. So it's not like they're hitting everyone. In fact, most of the time they're missing. But now they have maybe a bit of a different strategy here when it comes to acquisitions. Not necessarily studios, just full-on IPs. We can see this is over on Reset Era, as they are citing a K, as that is paywalled, but they just copy and paste the whole thing here, saying, following the debut of its financial business on the Tokyo Stock Exchange on Monday, Japanese conglomerate Sony Group is set to step up its efforts to acquire intellectual property in the entertainment sector. Its strategy in the field resembles that of Japan's major trading houses, but as investors focus their attention on the entertainment businesses, Sony will likely need to better explain the performance of big investments to win them over. Rather than creating its own IP from scratch, Sony has pursued a strategy of investing in IP holders such as Bandai Namco, which owns the Gundam franchise, and publisher Kadokawa, which has a portfolio of popular young adult novels. Over the past 7 years, Sony has invested 1.9 trillion yen, that's $12.8 billion, into IP, with the IP and businesses it has acquired being combined with Sony's various operations, games, movies, anime, and so on to maximize value. And I mean, that has been the big thing for Sony now. They are taking their IPs, even if they start, say, in games, and spread them out to movies or anime or manga. They're doing a lot right now to just have more value outside of games, because let's face it, games are very expensive. Games take a while to make. So rather than just do what end up being kind of smaller returns on games versus other big investments in entertainment, why not do everything, or as much as you can, really? I mean, you see Nintendo doing something similar, where they're investing in theme parks, just experiences away from games. Theme parks, movies, merchandise, and so on. Sony doing something similar here, but, I mean, they have all of Crunchyroll. They're very much becoming involved in anime completely, right? A lot of the distribution especially, and games being intertwined. So this is a big thing for them going forward, to where it does make sense for them to leverage any cash reserves currently to buy IPs, intellectual properties, or invest in companies that own substantial intellectual properties, as Bandai Namco has been mentioned, or Katakawa. So don't be surprised if you see randomly Sony pops up buying 5 to 10% of a company, or in some instances, maybe just the entirety of a single IP, because they got big plans right now for expansion, and they need a lot of entertainment properties to make that work. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Tokyo Game Show. While that is over, we are still seeing some quotes come out of the event, and one in particular I have to point out because it's sort of wishful thinking, but I almost want to will it into existence, all right? So Phil Spencer was on a stream and an interview that was going on with IGN, again at Tokyo Game Show, and it's about an hour long, but there was an interesting point. It was only about 30 seconds, but it did make me go, I wonder if Phil has, because he thought to bring that up. Is something going on with Lost Odyssey? I know. Hey, I'm trying, okay? Let's take a look. This is part of, again, the live stream that was happening. I went ahead and transcribed it so we can read over it here. Now, what happened was Phil was asked, and these were questions coming in. I don't know if they were looking at the live chat, but it was just questions coming in from somewhere, just the audience, okay? And one of those questions had to do with past franchises that have been kind of quiet or dormant, things that they've done in the past, even going back to the 360 era, original Xbox, that Phil would like to see come back, right? So he mentioned things like, what did he mention? Mech Assault, that was one. Crimson Skies was another. They kind of moved on from that section until he kind of stopped everyone and said, hold on a minute. He says, I'd like to add one. I mean, sitting here, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon. Again, very, very odd to go back to that unless there's something more to it. Anyway, he says, games from our history, which I do hear a lot, and our relationship with Sakaguchi-san, good design, and building those games I was actually involved in working on with here in Japan too, so those are also two, just being a Tokyo Game Show, it'd be stupid for me not to mention those. I mean, you can just also not mention them and move on. This is something where you just go, interesting. Lost Odyssey being brought up, Blue Dragon being brought up. I don't necessarily know if Blue Dragon's going to make any kind of return anytime soon, but Lost Odyssey, that is one that, Mistwalker's out there. They just did, Fantasian. It's possible, I think. Look, here's the thing. Ninja Gaiden 4 almost popped up out of nowhere. I wasn't necessarily expecting that to just make a big return like it did. And it turns out Phil Spencer kind of brokered the deal, got it set up as the big publisher, rolling in with the money, and then they were off and running. Who knows what's going on there with Mistwalker and Microsoft? Is that possible? Could they have come in at some point and been like, hold on, I don't want you guys to forget about Lost Odyssey because maybe there's something happening behind the scenes. So, Lost Odyssey. Oh yeah, and Blue Dragon, but definitely Lost Odyssey. I don't know. Something to keep in mind. It was just, it caught a lot of people's attention because this one quote, a few sentences, made headlines on places like Windows Central. So just keep that one in mind for the future. Maybe Microsoft decides to make that kind of investment in Japan because, just having more diversity when it comes to Game Pass with different genres like RPGs and action games and others, it does make sense to at least take a shot at it. So we'll see. And before we go to the comments of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you ever played Silent Hill 1? 67% say no, 33% say yes. I'm actually a little surprised that yes was that high. I was really thinking it was gonna be like 80-20 or something. 67% though have not played Silent Hill 1, and that could also be people who are just not interested in like horror games, very possible, but it is also kind of painful to go back to some of those, again, early 3D days, and that is a game that's been so long that it could use a really good remake. Silent Hill 2, I think, came out great, especially the audio design, which I would say is the most important part to horror games, and leveraging 3D audio and all this other stuff. It was great. So Silent Hill 1, I think, right, is in very good hands. Not necessarily something people were saying on the build up to Silent Hill 2 with the Bloober team, but now I'm like, yeah, give them Silent Hill 1. Let's see what they can do there, because that would be really cool to go back to. It's been a long time since I've played Silent Hill 1. I may have played it last, the first one, during the PS2 era, backwards compatible on the PS2. So I'd love to go back and check it out with obviously being a full remake, new visuals, audio, the whole thing. And yes, probably some creative liberties that will, I'm sure, cause some arguing back and forth with the fan base. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from the Infinity Master saying, John, the removable battery controller is due to EU regulations requiring most electronic devices to have a removable battery feature to reduce e-waste, which I believe will take effect sometime next year. I'm personally excited for the smartphones industry to go back to the era of removable battery, because slower battery charge over time, reduced battery lifespan is one of the biggest reasons for people to drop their old phone in favor of new ones. Yeah, that is a great point when it comes to phones. Remember back in the day, I mean, it might sound weird to some people. I'm trying to think of when that really happened, where all phones just became sealed. Back in the day, I mean, you could just rip the back off your phone, take the battery out, new one in, and some people would travel. I used to have a spare battery at times if I was going on a trip somewhere. I would just have a fully charged spare battery, and I had one of those external chargers for like a Galaxy S2 or something, and I had the spare charger for it, and you could charge it up and keep it off to the side in a bag, and if your phone died, take the back off, new battery in, old battery out, drop it in, close it back up, and you're off and running in 30 seconds. Much different now where it's more like, oh, charge it for 15 minutes and you'll be like 50 or 60% of the way full. It's like, no, I just changed the battery, I'm good to go. And you're right, when it came to e-waste, that was a much bigger deal. Phones now, people just throw out or put in a drawer when it stops turning on, and there's many times where it's just the battery itself needs to be replaced, but you got to open it. Sometimes the back itself is glass. It's a whole thing. I'll just go get my upgrade for the 2-year plan or what have you. So I like the idea there. I hope that's the case. Phones get the removable battery. Controllers, that just sounds like it's good for consumers. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe I'll check out the insides of a system that also might need a removable battery at some point with the whole EU thing going on with the Switch 2. That battery is not fun to take out, and I'll leave that video right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.